space. Yo, Gary.
Hello.
Yeah. So Gary and I were talking a little bit before this, about 15 minutes that wasn't recorded about Gary's job and the plastic that's available in the eyewear industry and the importance of starting small and creating the infrastructure to start creating change on a community local level. I was in a call. Have you heard of climate conversations?
I have not, no.
You join, I think it's like every Wednesday or Thursday, every 2 weeks, and you're grouped in with a bunch of people from all over the world, and you talk about your feelings about climate change. And
Oh, it's amazing.
I did one in 2020, and then I got really, really sad about, people are like really worn down from doing this stuff. And it's like I communicate, like, if we start saving our plastic at home, there's a mitigation of guilt. At least that's what I feel when I like save wrappers and stuff. And I was doing this quite a bit when I was in Tennessee because I had more space to organize the different bits of plastic. But now I live in my van, so I don't really have the luxury of collecting stuff. Like I can't, it doesn't make logistical sense for me. So now that I'm saying that, I feel like I can still hold on. I mean, I hold on to my bottles and then I put them in the recycling stuff, but I don't hold on. But I'm also not really buying as much either. You know what I mean? Like I'm not getting as much packaging. But the idea was to start holding on to our trash and start organizing our trash at home, and then create in curriculum ideas to build creatures. That was one idea I had as like a at-home activity with people. I mean, the goal, Gary, is to create these massive sculptures on a much larger scale in every city, and then have like a story. I was on this pitch competition, and this guy, he came in second. His company is called Social Bee, and you essentially take pictures or videos of areas and you make your own story as you move around, like a tour thing. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. We can make these sculptures on a community scale and then have a little story that brings us from like, I don't know, like what the most eastern side of America is, all the way to like the west in Nevada, where we have the plastic museum. And you can like do like a little like 2-week road trip. You know what I'm saying? And like have a system built out in New York City where we have council members figure out, like I saw this huge plot of land driving by like this sandy area, and I was like, yeah, this will be perfect. Like we can make this massive sculpture with all the plastic waste, and that will be, but have it be functional as well. Like I saw this Marilyn Monroe statue and people were hiding underneath her skirt when it was raining, and I was like, have it be a functional sculpture,
Yeah, for sure. Habitats, you know what I mean? I mean, that's, we got plenty of homeless people. There's no reason why we can't be building houses out of this stuff, you know what I mean? As long as it's safe and processed and clean.
They already do that.
Yeah, so I mean, that being said, I mean, I kind of focus on the more, I don't want to say practical because that sounds like art is impractical, but that's not the case. I don't believe that. I think that, my practice has always been sort of to not disrupt any kind of systems necessarily, but change the way that systems are operating without necessarily changing the practice of these systems, right? Like, and I think that's partially because there are a lot of smart people that have been working on this for a long time, you know what I mean? And a lot of I would say that most of the resistance and most of the reason why we're still in this broken system with plastic is because of money, and profit and extremely large corporations and an incredibly large amount of money, like multiple countries worth of money. I mean, petrochemical is, trillions of dollars, you know what I mean? And I don't personally believe that we cannot solve this issue. I believe the reason why we're not adopting these circular methodologies is not because they're impractical, or not because we can't develop a way to make them practical. It's all revolving around the system of economics, you know what I mean? And macro and microeconomics, right? And New York City is probably the worst place to be in terms of this because of labor, right? But it makes a ton of sense. And part of the reason why Precious Plastic and other organizations like mine and like other people's, part of the reason why they're operating in countries that are developing is, number one, a lot of our waste ends up there by default. And number two, there's abundance of labor where people need jobs, and it's very easy to create an economy with these types of systems in those types of places. In New York, it's not very easy to do because labor is extremely expensive. Like, everybody's time is extremely valuable here because they have to make rent. You know what I mean? So looking at sort of existing things and trying to shift it into, or working on shifting it, trying is lying, working on shifting things to, within the framework more or less of what is an existing system, right? Or utilizing the best parts of the existing system, and looking at it extremely pragmatically, because nobody wants, from my perspective and from my experience, nobody wants to hear about my philosophy. They want to see the numbers consistently. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that the philosophy and the desire and the manifestation and that the intent of altruism and helping to mitigate this problem is not important. It is very, very important. It's why I get up every day and do this. But from my perspective, the stuff that I don't ever really want to do is like crunch a bunch of numbers and like do all this data analysis. Like, that's not where I want to go. Like, that's not what I want to be doing with my time. But that's all anybody that has the capital or the infrastructure or the ability to move things in a large scale, that's all they want to know is, what are the numbers? Like, how much does this cost to do? How much is it, So I've been really diving into that realm of things since I started this whole operation. Once I kind of got the idea of how I can actually do it on a small scale, the second thing that I immediately dived into is that. And that's, an ongoing process and figuring out, different types of data points, like that capital, that people that invest, and that people that have, resources and infrastructure to enable this on larger scales. That's what they want to see. That's not what I want to be doing. Like, I want to be making huge sculptures out of plastic or whatever, for sure. But, and forcing myself to be pragmatic and be sort of grounded, you know what I mean, has been a challenge for me, and that's that's after consistently forcing myself to go in that direction. I think that now it comes a little bit more naturally to me, which is good. And I think that also adds credibility, to the philosophy, to the dreaming, to the manifestation. You know what I mean? Like, these are my ideas, these are my ideals, this is what I'm going for, and here's the numbers.
Yep.
And then it's a wrap. They can take what they want and leave the rest, right? But at the end of the day, I think that for me has been a focus, and it's been extremely important to get those data points and to be able to share those data points with people. I do not believe that this is an impractical direction. I think that if we spent as much, time and effort and research and capital on developing the system as we do on,
don't make me say it. I don't want to say it. I'll say it. COVID. How quickly they were able to implement this stuff. How quickly they wanted to come together to get a message out there.
Yeah, but even just how much money petrochemical companies spend on recycling programs that absolve, people in their mind are absolved of responsibility for continuously using these packagings.
Right.
Or nobody's we're starting to get into producer accountability. We're starting to get into minimum recycled content, we're starting to get into policy, you know what I mean, where it is actually starting to, there are things that are starting to become accountable.
2019, they banned plastic bags, but I still see plastic bags all over New York City. So, like, You know what I mean? As
Yeah, no, totally. I think policy is important, but I don't think it never is, it never is as effective as just doing the damn thing. You know what I mean? Like in, punitive measures or bans or whatever, like none of that works, unless you're enforcing it, number one. Number two, I feel like incentivization is a way better model to go because everybody wants the money, they want to cash the check. The problem with incentivization is it's more profitable to waste. Like all the bad, everything bad is enabled. Everything bad is enabled, and everything that's good is like it's like pulling teeth. You know what I mean? Like I had to build my own friggin' machines. Like I have to make my own materials. Like this is crazy. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, Earth Challenge. Yeah, I was at a bodega.
it just doesn't have to be like that. You know what I mean? Like
100%, Gary. I'm with you. Like we're all you, me, Renee. Swinging over to Renee. Hi, Renee. Thanks for joining us today. Renee, Gary, Renee. Renee is Renee, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself actually.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm the founder of Liberty Yoga. We design sustainable yoga mats, all made from sustainable materials. We are a member of 1% for the Planet, which means that we commit to give 1% of our sales to nonprofits that help to fight climate change and do planetary actions. And I'm really loving this discussion because we recently pivoted to become a circular brand. And what that means is that we're moved away from using virgin resources and instead use recycled materials, such as recycled plastic bottles to make our products because, our earth already has an abundance of these waste materials. And, we're just trying to reduce the waste that goes to landfills and also upcycle it with our recycling partner, TerraCycle. But I'm really loving everything that you're saying, Gary, and it really resonates.
Thank you. That sounds awesome, Renee. What has your experience been with TerraCycle, by the way?
We just started our partnership with them. So what we're doing is really a pilot program with them where we purchased their zero waste box and put it and partner with yoga studios to put the zero waste box. And of course, we offer a $15 coupon as an incentive for people to, drop their unwanted yoga mats. We have expanded it to all sporting goods so that we can fill the box as quickly as possible, because based on discussion with TerraCycle, they need volume in order to remanufacture these materials. And so we're trying to collect as much volume as we can and try to get it as full as quickly as possible so that we can upcycle it into new products that we're manufacturing. They also, if they cannot upcycle it, then they will donate it.
But do they return material to you, or?
So there is a program where they can return the material to us. And they actually work with other brands like SC Johnson and other brands. But with respect to our relationship with them, what we're looking for them to do is either upcycle it into either a yoga block or another yoga product. And if they can't do anything with the material, then they will donate it.
What do they donate it to, Renee?
They didn't say. So I know that they work with another brand called, they could actually, for example, donate it to like shelters, anywhere that they would use yoga mats.
And then so the circular process is not, that's just all like a separate sort of donation program. But in terms of your circular process, where's the material coming from?
So the material, initially we were going to work with Plastic Bank. What we decided to just work with our manufacturer who has the plastic, the plastic material that, the excess plastic material or the excess waste material on their factory floor, because they actually work with other brands. So what they're doing is just, we're taking any excess materials, we actually ask for our PET, which is recycled plastic materials, and put it into our product.
Awesome.
And they're
Yeah,
manufacturing.
I think it's extremely important to know, you know, in these circular, there's a lot of greenwashing that happens, and I'm not saying
Yes.
that's on your part. There's a lot of companies that represent, in particular on the material side of things, you know, and the marketing side of things. The reason why I'm asking that is it's the material itself that you're manufacturing with is extremely important, which you probably already know this, but I'm just reiterating for the audience. Is that it's extremely important to identify where the material actually is coming from. You know what I'm saying? Because oftentimes there's a lot of misrepresentation there. And that's not to throw shade on any of the companies that you mentioned. It's just, that's why I ask where the material itself is coming from.
Is it in China, Renee? You said before one time.
In Taiwan.
Oh my God.
No, and Asia in general is very good at not wasting things. You know what I mean? Like it's not, they're better than us, that's for sure. And that's a gross generalization, obviously, but you know, in my experience, it's been, you know, the availability of you know, truly circular materials is happening. You know what I mean? Here it tends to be a bit shadier in general, in terms of representation. But yeah, I mean, and you know, I think the yoga mat circularity is a good thing. In general, so bravo.
Well, I know there's room to do more, and you know, I'm willing to, you know, continue learning and growing up the learning curve to see how we can do better. But you made an excellent point in terms of knowing where the material is coming from.
Yeah, in general, I mean, I think we can all do more, right? It's the world can do more. It's a massive problem, you know what I mean? So there's any way that we can do more in any capacity, really. At the end of the day, there's tons of ways to contribute to this, you know. And it doesn't have to be materials related or even recycling related necessarily, but it's just, you know, also sharing the message, you know, back end, you know, digital development, any of that stuff contributes. You know, if it's contributing to mitigating the plastic waste issue, then it's important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not only artists and creators and companies and all that, it's actually everyone, you know, and everyone needs to be involved because everyone is participating in the problem.
Exactly. It has to be, you know, where it's not just our yoga brand, but all yoga brands are participating in this, you know, in the circular economy, and you know, creating a movement around it. And this is what I'm hoping to do. But I really love that point. Yeah.
And also even potentially experimenting with materials that don't involve plastic as well, I think is a good move too, like cork, you know, different types of renewable resource. Might be a direction.
Our current products are made from cork. They're sourced from Portugal. But we're looking to just move away from using virgin resources and just use you know, 100% recycled materials. But the base of our yoga mats, the foam, is actually leftover materials from overproduction. So that our manufacturer works with Lululemon and, you know, Manduka and other, you know, big name brands. So they actually, what they did was use the overproduction and actually made the bottom of our yoga mats from that.
And like offcuts and stuff, I imagine. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks, Renee, for sharing that. Yeah, I have a question for you in terms of ton weight into profit. So you have math on, let's say, we use a metric system, or you know, like 10 pounds worth of plastic shredded material. How much do you have numbers that equate to the calculated monetary payoff, if that's the right language?
As a raw material, you mean?
As the shredded material, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're doing, so say So in the process, right? So there's collection, and then there's way. So essentially what can I say? The
Do you
there are processes along the way in which you can continue to generate revenue. So even just sorted plastic, it's not even cleaned or anything. So a company like Sims inloads all of the plastic that they can get their hands on in the New York 5 boroughs, and I believe a little bit of Westchester as well. They bring in plastic on barges, and all they do is sort plastic. I don't know if you've ever been to Sims.
Where
Highly recommend it. It's in Red Hook. It's a municipal. It's a private corporation, but they are amazing. They are a model for plastic processing all over the world. It's one of the most, highly acclaimed processing facilities that exists. So it's run on renewable energy, like a significant percentage. I don't remember what the exact percentage is. All the architecture is like coastally resilient, so drain it. They thought about everything. You know what I mean? There's an educational facility inside. You can go. They have educational outreach programs for kids and adults. But it's this massive machine essentially that they just have a front loader, and there's piles of plastic comes in on a barge. It gets dumped in their warehouse. There's a front loader just loading all this plastic into this massive sorting machine with like mass spectrometers, high-speed cameras, lasers, etc., and people as well. And they just sort plastic all day long, and then they bale it of individual types of plastic, i.e. 1, 3, 5, whatever. And they sell that on whatever the open market is as a negotiant. So like if you look up, let's see if I can find there's a website, and it's just like any commodity, it's a fluctuating price point of raw plastic, right? So I have it somewhere. I'm just looking for it here. Okay, here we go.
And how do they collect the plastic? Or are they part of the New York City Department of Sanitation, and they collect the plastic, the recycled plastic? Or do they have their own?
Yeah, no, so Recycling Monster is just one of many websites that can tell you like how much, a kilo or a ton or a bale of different types of plastic is worth on the what the going rate for plastic is. So for example, HDPE is like laundry detergent bottles, etc. So one pound of HDPE is 57 cents.
Is that shredded, or is it pre-shredded, or no?
That is not shredded at all. That is just sorted.
Yeah.
So it's only HDPE. You have a bale of however many pounds of just HDPE. That is 57 cents per pound.
Yeah.
So then shredded plastic is more valuable, right? Because you processed it now.
Right.
So, double that. So $1.14 per pound. And then, if it's color sorted, potentially, then you can get another, $1 for it. Right. And then if it's pelletized, then it's whatever the pellet price is. So the pelletized is essentially they process it, they run it through like a filament extruder. So it's essentially extruding little pellets, right? These little, what are they called? NURBs or something? No, not knurls. I forgot. There's a name for them. So that is what industrial manufacturers use to put in. So they don't put shredded plastic in their machines. They put these knurls or whatever they're called into it's like a bag of pellets essentially, and they're all the same size, so you can gauge how much it's very specific temperature, etc., and it's all uniform. So those are a specific size, and a machine will use this, and you have settings for how to use that size of pellet. And that's pretty expensive. That probably will go $10-15 a pound, maybe. That's probably a high-end estimate, actually. No, like $5-10 per pound for pellets. but that's another processing, right?
So
And then,
I'm sorry, along the way, Gary, about the pellets, they're not putting, what are they putting in to make the pellets?
nothing. They're just, you just heat the plastic so that it's uniform, and then you extrude pellets
Okay, understood.
so that it's a uniform size. It's like a BB.
Yep.
Or like a bead or something, you know, and they're all uniform size, because then you can add, whereas shredded plastic is not a uniform, like every particulate is not the same size. So it causes variables with melting temperatures and melting time. So if you're doing a high speed like injection mold that makes 1,000 units per hour or whatever, like precision is extremely important. So that's why most industrial manufacturers like are not even going to mess with shredded plastic at all. Like they won't even give you the time of day if you're trying to sell them or approach them with shredded plastic, because it's going to jam their $1 million machine and that's it. It's a wrap. But any industrial manufacturer, they already use pellets, which are generally made out of new plastic, but you can make pellets out of recycled plastic.
Yeah. So it's better
So,
to
I mean,
the whole plastic and then give it to the people who are going to then decide what to do with it, essentially.
well, I mean, there's just along the way. So like on a small scale operation like mine, like I can sell along the way. So like say I collect too much material to process, but I can't sort it. So then what I can't process, I can sell as sorted plastic. What I can shred, and if I have too much shredded plastic, I could sell some shredded plastic. And if I have, you know, I could along the way, you know, if I don't, I don't know, if I don't want to go all the way to the product thing, I can sell raw materials, sheets, beams, you know. So it's for me, I think, you know, the flexibility of being able to generate revenue at every stage of this process is really important. And I've been exploring each of those facets to have that data available, right? And it's there. I haven't really done any of it other than, you know, than sell products, but there's ability to generate revenue at every stage of this process. And there's also the ability to divide and conquer. Like it doesn't have to, like my small little company does not have to do all of this. You know what I mean? You could have a company that just shreds plastic. You could have a company like Sims who all they do is sort plastic. That's all they do. There's a company that so Sims then will send it to a processing facility, for example. So they have this sorted plastic, they send it to they don't process any of the plastic at all. They just sort it. So then the processing facility shreds it and melts it and creates pellets potentially. There's a lot of things that they can do with it at that point. But it's, you know, what can I say? The industrial process is like specialized, right? So like, it's like one aspect of this process is an entire company.
Wow.
Whereas I do all of these because it's at a small, like I'm creating proof of concept systems in order to see if they work and then see how big they can get before they fail.
Right. So what would make sense then on a community level when we have the shredder machines to, since most industrial companies don't want to accept the shredded plastic, do we then move on to making one of those machines that makes the beams? Like what makes sense on that framework of collections?
Well, I think, you know, I think one of the things that Precious Plastic is extremely good at is organization, right? They're creating a blueprint for you to do small spaces. And what they did with Precious Plastic Universe is they divided, so they're not assuming that everybody has all the machines. They you know, created a blueprint to be a shredder workspace or to be an injection molding workspace. So one workspace shreds the plastic and then they sell it to another workspace that, you know, injects the plastic or extrudes the plastic. Now that doesn't necessarily, you know, for me, I like to be involved in the entire process. So what makes sense to me and what I'm in the process of sort of organizing with Precious Plastic NYC and with my own little company is like, what is a nonprofit activity and what is a for-profit activity? So Precious Plastic NYC is ultimately, we're in the process of filing paperwork to become a nonprofit. So what are those activities? Community outreach, education, collection, processing. So with Precious Plastic NYC, we won't probably often get to the actual finished product stage of any of this under that umbrella, right? What we will do with Precious Plastic is, pay, volunteers, or have some kind of incentivization for volunteers to help us process that plastic and shred that plastic. And then once it's shredded, that plastic can be sold to our individual private little companies that are actually creating products. So that way we're getting raw material from the nonprofit. It's keeping the nonprofit going. We're able to, organize it in a business sense where the nonprofit is doing some of the work that the for-profit might do, but actually it's benefiting both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
And then the for-profit, i.e. Formation Bronx, for example, I'm creating finished products and selling those products for profit. And I can also promote Precious Plastic NYC. So the for-profit can promote the nonprofit, but the nonprofit cannot promote the for-profit, if that makes sense. So I can point to Precious Plastic NYC saying, I get my plastic from Precious Plastic NYC. The nonprofit cannot point to for-profit companies. So in that way, we create, a small level of this infrastructure, and that could be duplicated in any, so you're having a nonprofit organization do community service that is valuable, that also feeds industries.
Question, Gary. So Precious Plastics sell the pelletized plastic to businesses for them to manufacture, or you actually do manufacturing as well of end
So
product?
right now I'm manufacturing. I do the entire process. So in my workspace in the Bronx, I have a shredder, I have an extruder, I have an injection molder, I have ovens.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at it's all very experimental at this point in terms of, like I'm not trying to really actively sell anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still very much in the, not very much. I mean, I'm further along. I do have a finished product available, but trying to figure out how that works as a business, like an actual business is, I think what I've been really focusing on more is that data in terms of businesses. And then the nonprofit part is the Precious Plastic NYC part is a little bit further developed because it's more clear to me how to make that organization work. Whereas the business end of it, so I've had several meetings, for example, with South Bronx Entrepreneurial Development, Sobro is their name. So they're like, focus on one thing because you can't do it all, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that doesn't actually, I don't know, they're right, they're not wrong, because the more you do, the more infrastructure you have to have, the more upfront costs, the more capital, blah, 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 right? So they're not wrong, but I think that part of the problem is that we get bogged down by these specializations, and like it's not a system that's working in tandem because it's 7 different companies doing this. They're not all in sync, for example, you know what I mean?
Yeah, got it.
So I think it's actually changing that in some way where it still makes sense from a business guy standpoint or a businesswoman standpoint, or non-gendered business person. It doesn't, I think we can change that, modify it enough so that we are in sync, but we're not like it's a broken system, like it's not working because we still have this massive plastic problem. And I think part of that problem is because we're not working in sync. Everybody's just like dog eat dog, out to get them, for whatever profit they can out of whatever, right? And I think this can all work better together And part of the nonprofit for-profit idea is to ideate a system that works and that generates revenue for both nonprofit activities and for-profit activities. And I think it's extremely important to ideate those ecosystems, because it's all an ecosystem and it's all completely interconnected, and that in the waste cycle, but it's not as completely interconnected in the way that businesses are communicating with each other.
Yeah,
Because
makes
businesses
sense.
are just trying to extract their perspective on profit as much as possible. And it's the rest of it, it's tunnel vision, as it were.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, we do this and we need to extract as much profit out of this one process as possible. And part of that is efficiency, which is great. The efficiency part of that is great. What's not great about that is that's the tunnel vision. And then whatever waste is produced or whatever is not going right, it's not enabling other systems, because it's not thinking holistically about what's the problem and why this is continuing to be a problem.
I'm thinking about the cling wrap around those big deliveries at grocery stores, and they take the knife and they cut through the. I've been in development for a product that will replace those cling wrap thingies using a lanyard material, lanyards, yeah, and then have like basically make a massive sheet of that with Velcro on the sides, and then that way you can just go zoop one time,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of opportunities to replace, like I'm all for like biomaterials and actually completely replacing plastic with something else.
Yeah.
I don't work with biomaterials because I do not think that there's a viable option on the scale that we're working on, which is global and insane, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, at least.
And even if we did create the perfect biomaterial to replace plastic tomorrow, there's still all the plastic that has ever existed still exists in the environment.
Yeah, there's like I've been thinking about this 6-prong process of eliminating or isolating or getting to the different stages of that using the heliocentric model. So like ourselves, the community, and then like global. So we start with ourselves first at home by keeping our plastic at home, and then it'll be great if we can bring that down to the local, I would call it the healing hub. That's part of the titties. We've been talking about this for a while now, and then bring your plastic there, and then we figure out what to do with it together as a community. But essentially, you're right though, like creating the infrastructure for one location first, and then like building that out into multiple locations, and then eventually nationwide and then global.
Gary, and I think that's scaling wise, and it's an issue of scale, because this is the scales that we have now. We have completely artisanal, handmade everything, which is super expensive. And then we have global, cheap Walmart, mass manufacturing. And I don't think that we've really focused on the in-between there. Because if you bite off this entire problem as a global issue that needs global infrastructure, then you get into the $1 trillion of capital and infrastructure that you need to solve the problem.
We don't need
which
it.
Is not
right. I feel like that's a paradigm fallacy. We don't need all these. We can do so much with very little. Again, moving back to my point about finding a location already that exists with the space that's available. The most capital need, maybe like 10 grand. Like we can raise that in 3 days. You know what I'm saying? Like with the right infrastructure.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
I mean,
not impossible.
I created my own factory out of the money. I don't make that much money.
Right.
You know what I mean? I did it myself. Like, I know that it can be done because I'm doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't have any funding, and I'm not even selling products. I've been doing research and development for 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't sold product enough to pay for what I just invested in. But I mean, after 3 years, I probably spent 20 grand and I have an entire production facility. Like I can produce, like I can pick up trash off the street and create a finished product.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and we haven't even started talking about styrofoam.
Right, or cardboard. Yeah, I saw those. I love that so much. I love that shape so much.
But so, I mean, like I don't, and it's not coming from our side of the equation. It's coming from corporate and blah, blah, blah about we can't afford this is too expensive. I'm like, well, dude, I'm doing it on like unemployment checks, bro. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm employed, but you know, you get the
We're
drift.
in the same space 2 years ago, Gary. I definitely hear people thought I was crazy doing this stuff.
So I mean, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? And how much money are we spending in you know, tax dollars to clean up all these disasters? Like it's trillions of dollars. Like we can't afford not to, you know, do something.
Yep.
And you know,
we're doing it.
it's just externalized costs. You know, these, you know, petrochemical companies and all the companies that produce this waste are not paying for the waste to be cleaned up. So I mean, that cheap, you know, whatever plastic thing that you're buying that's cheap, it's not that cheap because, you know, X amount of your taxes is going to clean that shit up off the street, number one, which could be going to education, which could be going to, you know, additional funding for research and development of better processing machines or better materials, or, you know, I mean, all the money that we're spending on disaster and cleaning up after these corporations is like,
right.
It's not nothing. It's like, you know, a lot of money, billions and billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars that, you know, taxpayers are paying for, you know, which could be going to other things that are much more positive. So, I mean, that really, for me, is one of the major, you know, like you can't, like the plastic being cheap thing is a complete illusion. Like this thing is everywhere. Like cancer treatment, you know what I mean? How much is cancer treatment? How much is your loved one dying of cancer caused by plastic particulates or whatever in the environment?
PFAS.
Like how much is that worth to you? You know what I mean? So I mean, it's there's all these, you know, thinking about systems, everything is interconnected. And so, you know, Aunt Tilda's, you know, cancer treatment is connected with the cost of a plastic bottle, you know what I mean? And it's connected to the cost of pesticides and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, looking at plastic as a cheap material is a complete illusion, you know what I mean? Or oil, for example. Oh, gas is, you know, a cheaper source of, no, it's not. It's not at all. It's just that the corporations that are profiting from it, it's not us, the taxpayers, it's the corporations that are profiting from it and not paying for any of the cleanup. So it becomes if those costs were internalized into the people that are making profit, then that would no longer be a cheap material or a cheap source of energy.
So they try doing that though, and then we get carbon. What's it called? Carbon points. You can get points. You can buy points, so we can pollute. Like then it becomes. I feel like the very matrix of corporations have a way of like spinning stuff around. It's like the narcissist, you know, like they manage to like spin things and they make you believe that it's something else and it's actually not at all. That's sort of.
It's our fault. It's our fault. Like we need to be recycling. You know what I mean? It's not, the onus has become, there's way too much responsibility placed on the consumer. And that's not to absolve us of responsibility. We are responsible to a certain degree, but it's also about our choices. Like if you like, it's extremely hard to live. Like I'm part of the problem. Like I'm definitely not perfect. I definitely use plastic products that are single use and or because there's not really a choice. You know what I mean? Like you have to be like real like crazy about
it's impossible
ridding your life of plastic. Like it's like a full-time job. You know what I mean? So like
how no that's
and a lot of sacrifice, and that's fine. Like I don't think that's a bad endeavor. Like I salute people that are able to do that. I mean, I think also addressing the issue is like humans are the problem, period. So even getting over that hurdle, like just existing is a problem. You know what I mean? Like in terms of environmentally, like we are the problem. There is no other problem. Like it's not called the Anthropocene for nothing. Like we are the problem. We are the center of the problem, but we also can be the center of the solution. So, you know, but like for me, like the first hurdle is like recognizing that I'm the problem and there is no black and white solution. Like I cannot absolve myself from the responsibility of being the problem, because no matter what I do, no matter how much plastic I reclaim and keep out of the environment and sequester from, you know, going into the ocean, I'm still part of the problem. There is no absolution for me. And there's no absolution really for anyone. And it's a very sort of nuanced thing to deal with. It's like, oh, well, I recycle, so I'm a good person, or I'm XYZ. You know,
What is that
I
narrative?
want people to feel good about it, but you know, the reality is that you can always do more, and it should drive you to do more. But at the same time, there is no absolution. You know what I mean? Until we don't use plastic anymore.
Right. Question. I have multiple questions actually, but I'm going to go into the second one. So when you hear about ending plastic production, when that phrase comes to mind, what comes as the first line item?
As the first what?
Line item.
Clean item?
Line item, like agenda. Like when you hear end plastic production, like what comes to mind as the first thing that we need to be doing, or that can be done, or should be done, or not should be done, but like for you when you hear that?
Viable alternative on a global scale.
Our next question is,
Because this has insinuated itself in everything. Yeah. And it's, I mean, it is massive. It is a runaway train, billions of dollars. I mean, I don't hate money. Money is a necessary resource, but it is so often the roadblock in terms of positive change that it drives me nuts. But this is multi-billions.
Yeah, I'm gonna
runaway train. Like you need to, not only do you need a viable alternative, but the infrastructure to produce that viable alternative in, like, we're talking like 300 million metric tons a year. Like today, like yesterday.
But also we can already use, okay, I want to get into that right now. I'm going to move into the next question. Okay, so then I'm going to segue into restaurants. Okay, so a initiative that we've been working on is a B2B business where we front the first 3 months of the viable product. So in this case, it would be, we've been working with Good Start Packaging. So that we managed to get 3 months worth of inventory for Vanessa's dumplings, for instance. Like they're massive, right? They use a bunch of plastic for their like everything they use is, even if you eat in, basically serve it on plastic plates. And you know, okay, I don't want to talk about that, but and then in exchange, they would give us their inventory so that that inventory that's waiting in the basement doesn't get circulated. Gary, what is something that we can use with the plastic spoons, forks, plates, bowls, cups? Is that something that would be, in my mind, these would be the materials to use to be building the sculptures? Maybe half could be used to be shredded, but what would make the most sense to get, once we have all this plastic out of circulation, what do we do with this inventory?
What do you do with the plastic?
Specifically forks, spoons. I'm talking specifically restaurant stuff.
It depends on the type of plastic. If it's polypropylene, I mean, here's the thing. Enduring objects. Things that are not going to degrade in the environment. My concern with outdoor sculpture is sunlight degrades plastic. So you're creating pollution.
Okay.
With an outdoor sculpture, for example.
Is there a way to mix this in? It sounds like maybe we have to mix it in with this type of material that doesn't erode. You know what I'm saying? Given how durable plastic actually is. I know it does like decompose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just making a blanket statement, but yes, research the material and the specific type of plastic that is to make sure that you're not creating more pollution by putting it outdoors. Right. I know that HDPE, for example, degrades in sunlight.
Okay.
It just does.
Yeah.
So thinking about applications holistically, about where can you put it that it endures. And you know, the manifestation is really arbitrary, right? But the criteria is keep it out of the environment. You know what I mean? So enduring objects, inside of other things as a filler, you know, walls, you know, or like structural material that you never see necessarily, but not things that can be washed. For example, like I have a big problem. There's a lot of like sort of polyester manufacturing with recycled plastic, like t-shirts, for example. You're creating microplastics like out of bigger plastic that can be sequestered out of the environment. You're then taking it and putting it into something that creates microplastic. Don't do that. You know what I mean? Drapes, carpets, those are pretty okay, but like a t-shirt, recycled polyester, nah, it's not. You're creating a worse problem because microplastics are damn near impossible to filter out of the ocean.
Yeah. Thank you for saying
so thinking about sequestering the material so that it's not exposed to the environment. Foundations, like as an aggregate to concrete, you know what I mean, or something. I mean, I don't quote me on this because I don't know the engineering feasibility of some of these things, but like ideas of things such as that, things that you may never see at all, but that could sequester this material away from the environment.
I'm thinking
and still perform whatever function is necessary for it to perform.
Right. Because like on one hand, it's like as much as we want to collect all this material, there's still going to be material that's being created in the factory. So it's almost like a labor moment where we come in and we're like, we're gonna redo your entire like labor scheme exactly here. You know what I mean? Like to like shut a slaughterhouse down, I believe. Well, moving back a step, shutting a plastic facilities down would probably use the same sort of energetic when you convince someone, like convincing of a plastic manufacturing industry, facility or manufacturing place. Essentially, what we want to be shutting these places down. Not we in like we're gonna get people out of their jobs, but in a way where we can effectively transition people from someone that's working on the line to someone that I would want to have them pick what they want to do, if that's something they want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or we could use that infrastructure in a circular way. It's pretty easy just to replace the material with second use material.
Right. I hear you.
So I mean, it doesn't.
Right.
I think that there's stages to this that are acceptable. You know what I mean? Like, i.e., just not using virgin plastic and using second, post-consumer plastic. I think is a great, sort of transition in terms of, until some kind of crazy biomaterial is totally viable. It's about taking this crap out of the environment. If we want to use it again, we can, and that's fine. You know what I mean? And it's better than what we're doing. It's not great. It's not perfect. Like, right. Honestly, plastic is going to continue to be a problem for generations, regardless of whether we stop using it or not. So it's just about the quickest thing that we can start doing now really is probably the best thing right now. You know what I mean? And as other things develop, more technologies to, more efficiently, clean it out of the environment and sequester it. Alternative biomaterials I think are fantastic, but it's not going to happen right now, and that infrastructure is not going to change overnight either. So I think viability wise, I think it's important even just to transition, from virgin plastic production to post-consumer plastic production in a circular model.
But then isn't that going back into to your recycled polyester point about materials being biodegraded?
No, I mean, that's just washable material. So, I mean, application is also extremely important. So if I'm not applying it to a t-shirt, if I'm applying that, I mean, stop using polyesters, my first recommendation. But second, regardless of whether it's new or old, polyester is not a material that, a fabric, textile is not an application that I would recommend using recycled plastic or any plastic at all in, because then you have the microfiber issue. Okay. Which is, extremely, extremely hard, way harder than a bottle to clean out of the environment. So I think application is extremely important. My sort of blanket, enduring objects, heirlooms, things that structures, inside of other things. Like those are applications. Those are and the manifestation again is highly variable, but thinking about endurance, like this thing is supposed to last forever and it will, so what are objects or products or applications where this is a desirable characteristic rather than an undesirable characteristic? Like in a landfill, an enduring object is not what you want, but in an object or a product that is supposed to last forever, it's good if it does.
Right. You're talking about homes, right? Like building homes out of this stuff, which they are doing. There's a woman that mixes, I want to say, brick with plastic in Africa. Can't remember where. And then somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it, and part of that is getting engineers on board as well. I think, in terms of what's feasible. I mean, I know that plastic, architecturally, like span wise, it has a tendency to bend, right? So I mean, it's about, pushing the engineering of this thing as well, which also informs, viable outcomes in terms of what to do with this material. And I think that that's something that's sorely lacking in most of, I'm not an engineer. I just,
Well, I would call you an engineer.
I mean, but on that level, I'm not an engineer. So it's and people, chemical engineering and all that stuff. I think it's extremely important to get that level involved in solving the issue. You know what I mean? And I think there are people that are involved in solving that issue, but on that level in terms of scientifically, but having that as a resource, you know what I mean, in order to propose like interventions, I think it's extremely important to have a very, very informed and professional opinion as to, the holistic outcomes of, also again, with the polyester thing, for example, like, oh my God, this recycled t-shirt is so cool, right? But actually it's not, because then if you talk to an environmental specialist, they're going to tell you that that's going to get microfibers, for example. And that's how I found out. I was like, oh my God, really? That's horrible.
I had no idea that was a thing. I was going to start a whole t-shirt thing with recycled plastic. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. So then segue off of that, and what would you recommend people do to be making t-shirts out of?
Hemp. I mean, it's crazy renewable. Bamboo.
Right.
Bamboo grows, like, you could watch bamboo grow and you see it. You know what I mean? So yeah, renewables, I don't know, like stuff like bamboo and hemp, like we're not using enough hemp. Like it grows everywhere. It's super renewable. It doesn't take a lot of energy to grow. Everything was made out of hemp 100 years ago. You know what I mean? And like, it is virgin material, but it's not a bad material. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of embodied energy in hemp fabrics or textiles, and it's better to use if it's virgin and biodegradable and it doesn't have a lot of embodied energy. In other words, the energy to produce it isn't costly, as it were. I would prefer hemp over plastic any day of the week, in terms of even recycled plastic.
Yeah.
Because the embodied energy of plastic is all the energy that it took to produce it, all the energy it took for me to reclaim it, all the energy it took for me to process it, and all the energy that it took for me to create then this new product, which is ultimately creating more carbon than if I just made the thing out of hemp. You know what I mean?
Right.
And hemp actually is sucking carbon out of the. So
Got you.
That's what I'm talking about thinking systemically, and thinking holistically about these issues is, okay, recycled plastic, it's awesome. It's made out of recycled plastic. It's not absolving anything necessarily if it's causing other problems. So if I'm using more, 7 times the amount of energy to make it out of recycled plastic, which is another argument for virgin plastic, is that, it's the embodied energy is what, but the reason why I reclaim plastic is because it's in the environment and it needs to come out of the environment.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Oh my God, Gary, you said a download. We're gonna be seeing mammal friends in the future, like a download. we're gonna be sea mammal friends in the future. Like there's a reason I know. Like, okay, yeah, there's that. Like I've been noticing that people who are like really adamant about changing this stuff have really strong connections to the ocean and like water. And I feel like for myself at least, like I have been told that I'm gonna be like a dolphin in my next life, you know, and
Sweet.
my last time on Earth. And so like this is my human self, like working with other like future mammal creatures. We don't want to live in an ocean that's fucked up, you know, like so we're doing the work now as a human.
I mean, we're not gonna live with an ocean that's fucked up. Is what's gonna happen is mass extinction. Like we're toast. If plankton goes away, we're toast. That's it. The whole food chain
Coral
falls
reefs,
apart. We're
bro.
dead.
I've been reading about the coral reefs and I freak shit me. Oh my god, I didn't even know that was so.
Yeah, dude. There is no future. Like that's not a future. You know, can we live with ocean death? No, we're dead. Like everybody's dead.
Right.
Like there's no life. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, quickly.
So I mean, you know,
Yeah.
That is real. I mean, in my mind, that's the alternative to like not, you know, not doing shit is like not can we live with it? We won't. No, we can't because we're not going to be living. There's nothing. There's no biosphere. And I don't think that is as far away as we think it might be. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
anyways, I'm very doomy in general. So
I hear you, Gary. Okay, if you could end one plastic product from being produced ever again, what would it be?
wow.
Renee, I want to hear your answer too, please.
I'm going to go with water bottles.
Okay.
The reason being is because they're just so ubiquitous. Like it's absolutely insane.
I was gonna say the same thing because wherever I go, even on a walk or on a trail, the most common trash that I see is a water bottle.
It's so ubiquitous. And then second choice would be polyester fabric. Because it's also ubiquitous, but a little bit less like seen.
Excellent. Top 3. You get one more. Renee, you too.
All right. Third would be packaging. Like as a blanket statement, packaging. We don't need to make packaging out of plastic. There's no reason to do so. Like you interact with that shit for like 3 minutes and then it's like, oh, wow. And then that's it. And then it's toast. No reason.
Renee, what about you?
The second after plastic bottles, the second would be plastic bags because that's the next common thing that I still see. And I would have to go with packaging because I'm an Amazon seller. And even though we package our stuff in sustainable materials, what I've come to find out is that Amazon reboxes and repackages. And so when it arrives to the customer, it's still plastic, So I just wish that there was an alternative so that, big businesses can use this and do away with these bubble wraps and all of these other plastic packaging.
Mine would be definitely the bottles and bags. Mine would be straws
Mm-hmm.
and something to do with medical equipment, like the syringes and like all the plastic that gets wrapped around the wristbands when you get to the hospital, like basically like the medical industry in general. I would target that industry. And then
I would say medical is kind of necessary, actually.
Let's talk about that because if we're talking about ending plastic production, how would we work around? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean, I would say so. Plastic and medicine has a very kind of strong connection in the sense that it's antimicrobial, right? And it's able to be, biologically clean, I guess would be it's not a clean material, obviously, as you can see the trash, but I think that medical waste is a very minor problem in the grand scale of things. And I think the benefit, not to say that there wouldn't be a benefit to replacing plastic, if there was a viable alternative, for sure. But I think the benefit there is actually, there is one, and it's pretty significant, actually.
Right.
Because what else do you produce, like an IV bag? What did they do before plastic? It was a glass bottle.
Can we use recycled plastic to make IV bags?
Legally, probably not. I mean, it's possible, yes, of course.
Right. Okay.
Anything that can be made out of new plastic can be made out of old plastic.
Exactly.
It's about, contamination, blah blah blah. Like, I don't know, but I mean, in terms of, I'm not advocating medical plastic waste necessarily, but it's important to think about ratios as well. I think straws, there are viable alternatives. Lollyware is producing, mass producing algae straws. Straws piss me off because there is a ton of viable alternatives and they're still not being adopted. I mean, you could use pasta, for example. Like I used to be a beverage director in restaurants, and I would use pasta instead of straws, like bucatini. And pasta you could throw on the ground. I don't like paper straws because they get soggy. So like user experience is impacted by paper straws, for example. Like if you leave it in your drink for more than 10 minutes, it gets soggy. Pasta does not, actually, and there's no flavor. So bucatini for the win. But straws piss me off because there is a lot of viable alternatives. Lollyware is a great company. I believe she's a Parsons alumnus as well. So she, well, I'm sure there's multiple people, but the one that I'm aware of is she. It's algae-based plastic, bioplastic, and they're producing volume, like a real amount, an industrial scale of volume worth of that. So there are viable replacements to straws that aren't being adopted. But yeah, straws are very annoying. 6-pack, the 6-pack holders.
Yeah. Gary's list.
A lot of viable alternatives there as well.
Yep.
Styrofoam.
Oh my God, styrofoam, bro. I have a story about styrofoam when I was living in Tennessee. Oh man, these restaurants in Tennessee, that's all they use. They don't even use plastic, they use styrofoam. Paper,
Well, thankfully I'm developing the methodologies to recycle it, so that's good.
I remember, yeah.
I mean, these guys that's what this is.
Is that made from styrofoam, yeah?
This is styrofoam, yeah. This is a lot of styrofoam. This is like a garbage bag's worth.
Holy shit, Gary. Yo, what about cardboard?
Cardboard, paper is not a problem. Paper is crazy recyclable.
Okay, I'm asking because yesterday I was parked on the side of the street and I was watching the trucks come by and people put the cardboard boxes into plastic bags, and it seems really redundant if there's a way in the similar vein of collecting plastic to be collecting the cardboard boxes from the restaurants or like the facilities when they empty the package, you know what I'm saying, like when they do the deliveries and they package it up and they put it into the plastic bags and it goes on the street, and just like this whole process, instead of it going into like a thing, we can pick it up and then we can do something with it, like what are some ideas that come to mind when it comes to cardboard?
Balers.
What's that?
Like when I worked in a grocery store in my early 20s and we had a baler. So there's no plastic involved. You just throw it in, it compacts the cardboard, and then it wraps it in string, and you call it a wrap. You make that string out of hemp, and there you go.
But then where does the cardboard go?
What?
Where does the cardboard go? Like after you wrapped it up with, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it goes to a recycling facility as a bale.
So basically, at least in New York City, maybe we can talk to them about not putting into bags, right? And like introducing a new system.
Yeah, why are we using plastic as a garbage bag? That's a terrible move.
Garbage bag. That's my third one. That's my third one. Thank you.
So we're putting compost in a garbage bag? Question mark.
Yeah, big time. What do we do with that? Who do we talk to about that? Department of Sanitation?
So there's bioplastic that's quote unquote biodegradable, like corn plastic. I have doggy bags that I clean up Calvin's poop with, and they're made out of corn plastic. And supposedly they're biodegradable, but I mean, it's probably biodegradable like in an industrial composting facility or something. But I mean, yeah, there's bioplastic films that could be replacing garbage bags for sure. And like what, I don't know, I mean, papers, I guess wet garbage is wax paper. I mean, wax is not that bad. It's just more about wet garbage. Like, what do you do with wet garbage? You know what I mean? So creating, I mean, bioplastic films, like things, different types of garbage bags that are not like a permanent material, like making toilet paper out of diamonds. You know what I mean? Like there's no, why are you doing that? It's a bad design move. It's a horrible design choice. So you're making a disposable thing out of a permanent material. Like that's the opposite of enduring object, right? It's something that you want to disappear after you use it. Obviously, it's got to be functional for the use, but design flaws. Waste is a design flaw. Like as designers, you do not use permanent materials in disposable applications. It's a terrible design choice.
I learned so much here every single time I speak with you about this stuff. Yeah, thank you.
So just rethinking some of that stuff, like not, and like reprioritizing, putting money lower down on the totem pole. Not to say that this isn't viable economically, because it is, but not making that the first priority of, I mean, America is particularly guilty of that. It's just like nothing works or is realistic unless it makes a ton of money, obviously you have to remain solvent, you know what I mean? Like that's not there's no question about that. It's just about, on the corporate level, it's like, oh, I mean, do you, like when I talk to corporations about making things out of recycled plastic and then tell them how much it's going to cost. So I talked to a cosmetics company about like making a little, like a lip gloss container for them.
Yeah.
And they said, they were super interested. They contacted me. I actually didn't contact them. They contacted me first. And I said, okay, well, how much are you paying currently for your cosmetics container? And they said, like a fraction of a cent. It was like less than a penny. And they said, well, how much would yours cost? And I said, oh, it's probably going to be like $1.50. So like 150 times or more the price of what they were paying for. But also at the end of the day, it's $1.50.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, you can also try to run it as a limited edition to see how customers respond by paying $1.50 more for their product in a recycled packaging. Yeah. And it was not well received.
Yeah.
And what they were selling this lip gloss for was like $30. And I don't know what their margin was necessarily, but the packaging was a fraction of a penny that went to $1.50.
Right.
So, I mean, this is the type of thing that's when they start throwing up their hands and being like, it's too expensive. Well, yes, it is 150x your current packaging, but it's also just $1.50 that you can easily pass on to your consumer or to your clients that are not probably going to bat an eye, number one, about $1.50, which is covering your entire costs, additional costs. And number two, like actually, what are you paying for marketing? And how much you can incorporate that into your marketing story. Like, oh, hey, listen, this is 150 times what we normally pay for packaging, but we give a crap about recycled blah, blah, blah. So, So there's a lot of, there's a lot of that. Like the reality is it's $1.50. Like, and anybody that gives a crap about plastic waste is going to be happy to pay $1.50 to do something small about it.
I know.
But it's like, oh, we're going to scare our customers or what, it's all a bunch of like sort of.
It's the, oh my God, nail this down to like the parent that just says no, can I do no?
Year of loss of profits.
No, it's like, why? It's like, because I say so. It's like, the fuck. Last question, Gary. Please tell us, what are you working on for the next quarter, for the rest of the year?
So we are in a partnership with Korez, which is a Greek cosmetics company. Precious Plastic NYC and Korez have a recycling lab in Soho, which we're doing demonstrations every 2 weeks on Saturdays. We're currently on a bit of a hiatus. We're changing some stuff about the machines, but we have an injection molder and a shredder, and people are invited to bring their cosmetics packaging there, and we can recycle it on the spot and turn it into products. Korez is a great company sustainability wise. They have a recycling lab in Athens where they're based, which is fairly large scale, and they make their own like giveaway products like combs and things like that. All their stuff is organic and sustainably sourced, etc. Most of it is they're doing it themselves. So olive oils and different things like that in Greece, mostly using local indigenous like Greek stuff. So that is one of the things. The second thing is building a injection molding machine that's pneumatic. So that is not a manual machine, it's pneumatic, so it makes the process faster and cheaper.
What is pneumatic? Let me look at that. Pneumatic.
It's with a P actually.
Thank you. PU?
PNU. So it's just using compressed air to do the force of the injection. So that makes things faster and that makes the end product cheaper.
Wow.
So that's in the process of being completed. And then the third thing is filing for nonprofit status for Precious Plastic NYC with myself, Dave Marin, and Tiffany Gomez. So we're the three sort of founders. And sort of the organizing that to a point where we are a nonprofit organization. It's been very informal thus far, kind of organic development and kind of individually working collectively, if that makes any sense. So starting to do more community outreach, organizing, getting sort of packages together in order to be able to do more outreach. Helping other spaces set up their own facilities, getting more larger, sort of machines to process more waste, getting, funding, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are the three things that I'm really focused on towards the end of the year. Formation Bronx is kind of, as more of the injection molder and kind of still continuing to sort of crunch numbers and see what my product costs are and start like client acquisitions. So I've been talking to a couple of different companies about partnerships in different ways. Mostly, a lot of what I get approached by is cosmetics and fashion in general, which is kind of interesting to me. I don't know why that is in particular, but so those are, making hangers and different like store stuff for the store. And what else? Cosmetic packaging, combs, soap dishes, things like that. So I think, sort of also ideating sort of what products make sense. I started with coasters just because it's kind of a thing with Precious Plastic. Like everybody starts with the coaster thing because they're generally fairly easy to make. Mine is kind of the next level design there because they're stackable and they fit together and
yeah, wow. Wow.
And they have branding and stuff on it. But so I started with that in order to kind of really do more like number crunching, like how much does it cost me from, picking it up off the street to selling it on a website.
Mhm.
So those are the numbers I've been crunching, and those numbers are fairly high. It's like $5 to $7 at the moment because of the machinery that I'm using, but that only gets cheaper. So I think that's again what everybody that I've interacted with from the quote unquote real world that's doing business and moving and shaking, all they want to know about is numbers. They don't really want to know about it. Recycled plastic is, people know that it exists and that it's available. They don't really think about it past that because they've been told that it's more, they've been told by their accountants that it's probably more costly and it's going to affect their margins.
Right. Gary, thank you for your time. I appreciate every connection that we make. I thank you, Renee, as well. I appreciate you popping in for today's session.
Of course.
Yeah. Sweet, man. This Saturday. Okay, so I know you guys are on hiatus, but Gary, let me know the next time you guys are doing that demonstration. I'll have to come through and see how this works. And I guess something for myself, and this is the last session of the workshop series before I move into my more long form classes starting in September. I'm gonna give myself a break though. Yeah. And
I think also like some of the things that we're focusing on, just to kind of cap it off, is starting to develop partnerships with municipality. Like New York has a lot of sustainability initiatives.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we can all kind of collaborate on, in terms of whoever's kind of New York local or currently residing in New York.
Yeah, the hard thing is about getting these people to show up to these meetings. Like they say yes, and then like they don't actually show up. But
I'm just not really in that world. So I mean, I'm happy to show up at a city council meeting. I just don't really have the bandwidth to be processing any. I'm not really involved in activism either. Unfortunately, I would like to be more involved. I mean, my activism is trying to create an infrastructure for for this stuff, but like I'm not like that's not my world at all. So I mean, I need to kind of be led there, you know what I mean? Like I don't have the bandwidth or the sort of the wherewithal to be really like in that circle, although I'm intrinsically linked, but it's not. There's people that are more knowledgeable and more involved with that type of stuff. And if I have a checklist of things that I need to do to get involved, like I'm very good at doing that. But if I don't, then I'm kind of just going off my own checklist.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Also, it takes a lot of reminding from what I've experienced. Constantly
For sure.
People that this is happening. That's something.
No, and part of the problem is everybody's working individually, so then you don't have time enough to work collectively, which then lessens your workload, which then gives you the ability to work collectively more. I'm terrible at collaborating, actually.
I hear you.
So, but if I did collaborate more, then I would have more time to actually collaborate.
Yeah.
So it's a circle.
Yeah, but we're learning. I feel like plastic is a really cool material, actually. Like I'm learning the energy of it. Yeah, I'm zapped right now.
There's a lot of good things about it, for sure. What's not good is, again, putting a permanent thing in a disposable object is not the way to go. Yeah. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, and we'll probably be opening up at Corez in early September again. So feel free, if you're in Soho, to stop on by at 232 Elizabeth Street.
232.
And their cosmetics and stuff are awesome as well. So come watch us make some product and get some moisturizer.
Oh. Gary, thank you again for your time and your expertise and your knowledge and your energy.
Of course.
We'll base again soon. Yeah, I've loads. This is like we've touched like the surface of what is really part of where we're headed together. So yeah, I'm excited to see what we're building. Big time. Renee, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And
Yeah.
nice to meet you, Gary.
Nice to meet you as well, Renee. And if you want, Hannah has all my info. If you want to, if you want to get in touch in any way or see what I'm doing,
Yeah,
Instagram
of
is probably
course.
the best way. But lately
Email
it's a lot
address.
of back stuff.
Put your email address in the chat so that Renee has access to. Yeah.
I already sent him a LinkedIn request, but I definitely plan to be in touch with Gary. Thank you so much, Gary.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I'm putting some of Insta stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. And, feel free to reach out anytime. And if you're in the neighborhood, stop on by.
All right. Bye. Thank you. Have a great weekend all.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.